the Browns will be the worst team in the AFC North. Welcome to the 2025 Cleveland Browns preview. The Cleveland Browns are an intriguing team going into this upcoming season. They have a ton of questions at that quarterback spot. Who's going to be the starter week 1? Who's going to be the starter by the end of the season? Ton of talent there. You got Shedeur Sanders, 23 years old. Dylan Gabriel, 24 years old. Kenny Pickett, 27. And then the old man himself, Joe Flacco, at 40 years old. That's insane. Shout out Joe Flacco. I'm biased when it comes to Shedeur Sanders. I think that he got the wrong end of the stick when it came to his draft evaluation. He should not have been a 5th-round pick. At worst, he should have been a 2nd or maybe a 3rd-round pick. What made Shedeur a great prospect in my eyes is the fact that he brings a winning mindset and winning culture wherever he goes. He did that throughout his collegiate career. It was at Jackson or Jacksonville State, either one. He brought a winning culture there to HBCU. Then you go on to Colorado. Yes, Colorado was an up and down experience, but for the most part, he brought in a winning culture alongside his pops and Deion Sanders. I don't expect it to be any different here in Cleveland. So how I see the quarterback situation going, I believe Kenny Pickett gets cut because I've never seen any NFL team hold more than 3 quarterbacks. I don't even think you can do that now that I think about it. Unfortunate because he was a 1st-round pick just a few years ago. Hopefully he can bounce back from that if that ends up being the case. Dylan Gabriel, I can see him being the 3rd-string quarterback. Shedeur, I see him being the backup. And Joe Flacco being the week 1 starter. You go with Joe Flacco because he has that veteran presence along with having that championship pedigree. And also, I believe this is a Cleveland Brown team that's going to try to compete. I don't see them tanking right off the bat. However, they're in the AFC, a conference filled with a ton of juggernauts. Eventually, at some point during the season, I believe they'll be out of playoff contention, and then they'll try to see what they have in their future when it comes to quarterback. And I'm not even gonna lie, I totally forgot. Deshaun Watson is a quarterback technically still in Cleveland. Prayers to Deshaun Watson. He's gone through a lot. I know he's had his scandals in the past, but when you go through the mental hurdles that he has with all these injuries the last couple of years, I'm hoping that he wins it from a life standpoint. From a football standpoint, I would love to see him get back to Houston Texans Deshaun Watson, but I have a feeling that we're past that now. He doesn't have the same swag and confidence as he did early on in his career. Not to mention, we haven't seen the production from him since then as well. So when he gets back, which I don't expect it to be this year because he had a setback. I think, he retore his Achilles, if I'm not mistaken. That'll be something to monitor going into the offseason. We'll see what type of success they get from the quarterbacks on this roster this season. But Deshaun Watson's time in Cleveland may be coming to an end. Elsewhere on the offensive unit, I like Jerry Jeudy. I felt he came out pretty strong towards the tail end of last year. He started finding that groove, and he started proving why he was one of the top prospects at wide receiver early on in his career. I'm not entirely sure if he can replicate that with the quarterback situation right now in Cleveland, but if he can, that goes well for his stock. Outside of Jerry Jeudy, what's his name? I believe it was Tillman, if I'm not mistaken. He came on pretty strong towards the tail end as well. And then you got David Njoku. He is one of the best tight ends in the league when healthy. If he can stay healthy, maybe he can string together a good year. And depending on whether or not the Browns want to be sellers at the trade deadline, maybe Njoku can land with a contender. Other than that, I don't see them being a dominant unit. At best, I think their ceiling is middle of the pack, but there's also a more likelihood of them being a really bad offense this upcoming year. On to the defense, we got one of the most premier pass rushers in the game, and Myles Garrett. Denzel Ward is returning in that secondary alongside Greg Newsome. Those are pieces that I believe are going to be great. You need those great players, especially if you just want to be competent and just, compete to some degree if you're the Cleveland Browns. Outside of that, I don't think that the defense is going to be what we've come to expect out of the Browns. Last season, they took a dip, which I didn't even notice in real time. I just assumed that they were decent, but looking at it in total, they were the 19th best defense, which is definitely a step down. When it came to stopping the run, they weren't that great. They were the 12th worst. However, on the bright side of things, they were the 12th best pass defense. So there's room for improvement for sure. I thought they added some interesting pieces in the draft. First round pick, Mason Graham out of Michigan. Shout out Wolverines. Him playing alongside Myles Garrett should be good for his career going forward. And then Carson Swishinger. He was a steal for the Cleveland Browns. I didn't watch too much UCLA football, but I looked at some of the tape. I looked at some of his stats. He seems like he's going to be an active force for this defense. And that's what Cleveland needs. Looking at his stats from his last year in UCLA, he had 136 tackles. 90 of them were solo tackles, and 8.5 of them were tackles for a loss. He ended up with 4 sacks, 2 interceptions, and he blocked a punt. I think they need that versatility when it comes to that linebacker position. They've lost a couple of players these past couple of off seasons, so Swishinger is an interesting prospect who can help that Browns defense get back to what it was just a couple of years ago. The Browns will be the worst team in the AFC North. There's no doubt about that. It just comes down to whether or not they can be competitive for that city. I mentioned in a previous video last week that Cleveland is looking to build a new stadium. The reason why Myles Garrett got signed to a big payday alongside with them keeping a lot of their prominent talent is just to make sure that they can remain competitive alongside making sure the fans have something to cheer for. You can't have a new stadium and then have an ass team. So Cleveland is not going to be that good. I don't expect them to be that bad. Maybe towards the tail end of the season, we might see them tanking so they could get a better pick for next year's draft. If you're a Browns fan, I think you have some promise. There is Shedeur Sanders, who I'm very high on. I know not a lot of people are, but he can be a franchise quarterback. He might not have blow-away talent, but when it comes to leadership, which you need at the quarterback position, Shedeur Sanders can give you that. And then, like I mentioned, with the defensive prospects, there's some talent there who can mature into being greater players. This is going to be a growing pain season for sure. If you're a Browns fan, don't expect too much. If they do play better than expected, that's great. But this is going to be a year where they're evaluating talent, trying to see who works, who doesn't, as they grow into the next era of Cleveland Browns football.